Probably anybody who has been listening to Venerable Children's talks for a while has heard her use the phrase, press the pause button. She talks about it in terms of as an antidote, often with our afflictions, when we're getting carried away with our anger, to press the pause button and think about the disadvantages or apply an antidote. Or when we're getting carried away with, our mind is just racing, to press the pause button. I've heard this phrase for, 20 years probably. And I've tried to apply it. In the last few years, I've been especially working to work with my speech, because as you here well know, when I have an affliction arising, my speech is very quick. The phrase, "She has loosed the fateful lightning of her terrible swift sword." Forgiving the writers of, who was it, Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Battle Hymn of the Republic. But that phrase, "loose the fateful lightning of her terrible swift tongue," I think is true. It's accurate. It's an accurate phrase. I hear it to myself, and then often, given a perceived provocation, that little snake of out it goes, and then I think, oh, pause. I didn't pause. All these years I've been trying to, how do you make a space? How do I make a space, given that that's my reaction? And it's well trained. And I would say trained early in my life. How to make the space between that feeling that wants to attack, to defend or protect, and the thing coming out. So this winter, I was, during winter retreat, I picked up again Tara Brach's book called Radical Acceptance, which is very useful for many, many reasons. But she teaches specifically this thing she calls the sacred pause, which is no different from Venerable's press the pause button. But there was some way that she expressed it that made me begin to see how I could actually apply this long given advice by my teacher, press the pause button. And I wanted to share that today, this pause thing. Particularly in light of our recent time with our nonviolent communication training with Lachelle, to see how taking the space, just creating the space to hear people, to hear oneself, which is where Brock's coming from, makes a huge difference in how we communicate and how we perceive things. So I'm just going to quote from her book a little bit. Radical Acceptance. The more we feel fear failure, the more frenetically our bodies and minds work. Right? Our flight or fight response is up. So we fill our days with continual movement. Planning, worrying, habitual talking, fixing, scratching, adjusting, phoning, snacking, discarding, buying, looking in the mirror. So what would it be like, she poses, if right in the midst of this busyness, we were to consciously take our hands off the controls? Because that's what it is. It's the control. And that's even why the fork comes out. It's like to troll the situation. Things are getting too hepped up. Things are getting too scary. We want to control. So what if we took the hands off the control and just went into free fall? Terrifying, right? No wonder press the pause button doesn't work. Why would you want to do that? It's not safe. But it's also not effective not to press the pause button. This is really clear. This is demonstrated over and over and over and over. So Brach said, learning to pause is the first step in the practice of radical acceptance. A pause is a suspension of activity, a time of temporary disengagement when we are no longer moving towards any goal. Getting the task done, making sure that person understood me correctly, wanting to harm them before they harm me, drop the goal. The pause can occur in the midst of almost any activity and can last for an instant, for hours, or for whole seasons of our lives. She often also says, often the moment we most need to pause is exactly when it feels most intolerable to do so. That moment. Or the moment when the pain is so great, that you can't do anything, you want to just do something to make the pain go away. That's the moment to pause. The moment when the fury is so high that you can't bear to take like the lid is going to come off. That is the moment to pause. So, okay, I'm bought in. I totally have bought in. I'm bought in to press the pause button. But the big issue is how to do that. So what I have found is this proposal that she makes has been very effective for me. She says, train in pausing when your mind is not inflamed. Duh! Train in pausing when there's nothing going on. So starting to develop the habit of a pause just in normal everyday activity. So the random thought to just stop, breathe, check in. Oh, what am I feeling right this minute? Or we could take it to nonviolent communication and go, what is my feeling and is there a need connected to this? It only needs to take this much time. Or pause, I'm a little agitated. How about I do some deliberate breathing for a minute before I can even get in touch with that? But to pause and check so that just like we spend our time on the cushion, meditating on our other antidotes, like loving kindness, for example, so that the anger doesn't rise so often. In the same way, in a peaceful moment throughout our day, we just practice inserting this pause. Pause. Time out. Pause. Breathe. And then carry on. And as we do that as a habit, then when we're under attack, perceived or real, when the emotions rise, that automatic pause thought comes because we trained in the quiet time. It seems so self-evident. Even with our meditation practice and wanting to bring mindfulness throughout the day, somehow to explicitly state the pause in this way has been revolutionary for me. So much so that even today, I've been planning on doing a BBC on the difference between love and attachment. I've been thinking about it for a couple of weeks. I really wanted to do the talk. I spent a bit of time this morning working on it, and then I called a pause. And I thought, that's not what's alive for me. I want to talk about the pause. So even in just that little example, it got me back in touch with what's really up in the moment, not what I think I should be talking about, or what was up last week that somehow I didn't get around to talking about, so I was finish it up. Forget it. Pause. I just want to talk about the pause. And it's really restful. So we take a little break. So one trick I've tried, which is not in her book, but I borrowed this from a famous Amos talk I heard many, many years ago when he talked about how he made chocolate chips famous. He had a little piece of paper in his pocket, and did it say this? It did. It said, I can be 10 times more enthusiastic. That was how he made his fortune, was through enthusiasm. So he had this in his pocket, and whenever he had lots of them, so he'd reach in a pocket and he'd come up with this crumpled piece of paper. Oh yeah, enthusiasm. So enthusiasm really is not the issue for me right now. Pausing is. So I have little bits of paper that are in my various pockets. Pause. It really is helpful. So it's a tip I wanted to share. I both wanted to share my process so the community might be relieved that the terrible swift sword may not come out so often. If you do, I'm working on radical acceptance as well. But in the meantime, pause. Or press the pause button.
When I went to therapy, I think my mind raced a lot, and I raced through my emotions and things too, so I wasn't so aware of them. And the therapist taught me that, I can't remember the words, but I really remember the image, and I still find it compelling. And I think it's because I used to hike a lot. And like when you're hiking up a hill, and you're usually when you're going uphill and it's steep, your face is like down, and you're working really hard, like it's a little bit like you're struggling with your emotions, or you're struggling to climb up this hill, and then you just stop and you look around and see the view. And so for me, when you brought this up, I always, it doesn't, I don't think of that to make me do this, but I think of it to remind me of the beauty of doing this.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.